I flew, the dreaded ums where you just say oh gosh, and it gets stuck, and then you just start saying ums, and then there's more ums, and you're like umming, and then you're just all ummed out, and then you're like, dude, stop saying you know, that kind of stuff. So So Jeff with Juicy Motorsports contacted me. I took a trip, I flew back to Georgia, and I went to his shop and I looked at a project that he had been pressing on, and just, he had a guy working on it there, and it's got a lot of heritage and stuff, but he wanted to see if we could finish it, and not just finish it, but put like our touch on it and make it a signature build. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so we have a Raptor. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Psych! 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 So this is Juicy Motorsports. Well, this is actually Jeff's Bronco, his personal Bronco. This thing has done a ton of miles. This thing has raced Nora, the Nora 1000 in Mexico several times. It's gone through several phases of builds. And you know, to an extent, like, kind of a rehab for trucks, and I don't mind that. Like a full build is nice, and it's like super gratifying, and you know everything is right from the start. But again, like touching on design challenges and touching on working through problems and turning them into like awesome solutions and making stuff look like it was not an afterthought, like that's all awesome stuff. And as long as you have the right bones and foundation to make something awesome, then you can make something awesome. You just might have to take a couple steps back or demo the shit out of something. So this is a 96 Bronco or whatever body style. This thing has one of two sets of the Solo Motorsports 9-inch front TTB kits, drop in 9-inch big nasty stuff. It has like an F250 style bearing on the end, locking hubs, solid front end. There is, I'm not going to take this off right now because I'd like to touch on the back, but I'm going to just spec this thing out like roughly. LSX Whipple blower on top. It's already got a mid plate. It's already got a trans, a 4L80 trans. We will be doing all firewall headers. We're probably going to redo the engine cage just to make it look like the back, because the back is going to be something awesome. Flip hood, big coolers. We really want to touch on like the finish work on this thing, so we'll get into what's in the back, but really it's going to be like getting wins on all the finish work, all the details. 12 point everything, every single bolt in this truck is going to be 12 point. The plumbing will be nice. The upholstery is going to be our shining star with this thing. Jeff and I are going to go super hard on dialing the whole interior out where it's just plush, luxury, suede, Starlight headliner, all that interior, with still having, you know, big air conditioning unit in it, all the amenities, full custom dash, full center section, 3 seats, trying to fit a refrigerator in that thing too, so we might have some real estate back there. Definitely keeping the 39s. These are like the most timeless, beautiful tire, I think, in history, and having them, they're also incredibly hard to get flats on. Not optimal for snow and rain. We have them on my wife's Escalade, and I just have her put it in the snow setting when she's driving in the rain, just for, you know, she might not be the most, you know, capable driver with correction, so if anything gets a little squirrely, it's better to have it in a setting like that. But for a Bronco like this, timeless look, just cleans things up. This has a big shock package. It has a 4-inch coilover and a 4-inch bypass and a 3-inch coilover and a 2.5-inch bump on every corner. It will be a 3-seater. This is what's in there right now. Now, nothing wrong with this dash. It's an aluminum dash. It is powder coated. It's got pretty decent work into it, but really to like take this thing to the next level, we want full MCD1 spec dash, spec center console, spec upper console, just balls out badass shit. And that was his whole program. Like, that was not on me, that's on Jeff. He wants that, and I agree. And I think probably a door panel treatment, if we run the factory door panels, which these are in pretty good condition, we'll either add stuff to or we'll redo. But you know, if you just take what's there, which is in good condition, and then you add a couple shapes to them, add some features or some trinkets, like some machine parts or something, that you'll get your own unique look. The color combo on this thing already, like, I think this is a badass color combo. I like I don't know, like, I guess you could call that gold, but it doesn't look like the gold that I might not be as much of a fan of. And I like the orange and black. Like, there's just, this all works as like a primary, secondary, tertiary color scheme. Like, they all work together. So we're gonna use everything we can out of this, and it's got a nice transfer case in it. Like I said, the engine's already here. It's all gonna be a fire package. But really, what you'll notice here is this is a extended wheelbase stock length Bronco. So usually when you stretch a Bronco, you stretch not just the wheelbase, but you stretch the cab, and the cab is stock. And it will have a unique look. It works, but it will be like a signature look of this thing, because the overhang in the rear will be so minimal. And obviously you see this thing set at compression right now. This will be 13 to 14 inches of up travel at ride height, which is optimal. 16 and 18 inch shock, so somewhere around 30 inches of travel in the back. But really, like, if you just look at where the cab ends here, or where the, you know, the tailgate section is, there will be like a tail light here, and this is Raptor glass in the back, but it'll really work. I think you know, if you think about like the Gordini, Robbie Gordon's Dakar vehicle, it's got a very short overhang in the back. It's very similar, and it's nice because when you know, we'll still have a bunch of weight over the rear, but we won't have so much where it just keeps coming around on you. It'll be very predictable and planted, and I really believe in it. And so we can kind of go and cover the back. All right, so things to consider. This thing did have, when we got it, like right when I saw it, when I was in Georgia at Juicy Motorsports, I looked at it, I went through it all the way to figure out like where a good starting point is, what we'd need to redo to get something optimal in the end. And that's like the first thing I saw was the cage. There's a Solo Motorsports cage that's pretty much from the A pillar to the B pillar and forward. And then everything that was out here was like McNasty, gnarly, like swamp buggy looking stuff, tons of tube, thick ass tube, gnarly MIG welds, all the stuff that just would not work for our program. Oh, it's Matt. Hey Matt.
How's it going?
Looking good. Thanks. So first things first, I looked at that. I think we, you know, there was shock mounts in this thing that were lower. Obviously, like you can see, there's a C-notch in the frame here. We initially intended on just cutting the cage out. That was the upper portion of the cage, and there was like a lot of like double stuff. So there was like tubes inside the sheet metal, and then there was like a tube structure outside the sheet metal. So really, like the whole chassis was doubled, which would probably be strong, but there's no point in having that because you don't need that much. And to simplify it and get greater packaging and space out of this thing was what we had to do. The other concern was the up travel. This thing was super limited on up travel, and it was one of those things where no matter what, it would be hard to sign off on it working right and putting money into making it something badass, and it's still not having like the right geometry in the rear to do what it needs to do. So first things first is like we started cutting stuff out, realized like the easiest way to do things here and to get that up travel was to just demo the old shock mounts, demo the chassis that was here, and then retain the frame rails that are in here, like all this area. That's all nice work and it's safe. It's just, we just needed more up travel. So like getting a notch into this thing and checking all the geometry, making sure everything swings the same at compression. It all checked out. So really we just needed that foundation. The other thing that helps us is with these frame rails intact still, and those are not factory frame rails, they're fabricated frame rails, but they're nice. And I think Jacob was the guy who worked on those, but they're not terrible or something, and they're TIG welded. There's some good work back here. So the win we get with that too is that we can float this thing where we don't need to have a chassis table style build going on, and we also don't need to have like all the trickery of plumb bobbing and squaring. Like as long as the frame is straight, we have enough rigidity in the structure where we can tie in and build this thing out like with this upper portion and be good. It's not like something where we're just floating everything in space and completely back halfing it. Something to look at right now is kind of like our main portions here that set the tone for everything else. So you can see like there's a big miter section here that goes through, and that's all clearance for articulation with the 39 at compression. And what I mean by that is like at compression all the way bumped out, and then also articulated. Something we noticed with this is the truck was not built with articulation. It was just built for, they mocked it up and then they built everything to it just being compressed. And when you swing the axle or you articulate it, the whole thing, like it started to crash. The bump stops crashed, like the bypass crashed into the sway bar arm. It was kind of a nightmare. So getting it right from the start just has to happen. We don't let things leave like that, or we just can't take the job because it's our name and our branding on this stuff. And if it doesn't work right and it just looks good, then what the fuck is the point of that? Part of like especially chassis work and like cage work is layout, and layout is so important. And I know that people have talked about like doing a fab diaries on that. Some of that I gotta like really figure out how to navigate doing fab diaries on. But really with, when I was at Art Center, a lot of like sketching, what the term or the phrase that was used was drawing through. Don't be limited to, like draw through, like where's this stuff gonna go? Even if it doesn't end on the car, like where's your line go? Where it flows. And that's what you really want to get after when you're thinking about like layouts and you're doing long runs of stuff, not where it's just like build this section, add this section. It doesn't, because it doesn't come out right. And then it looks like you just stack stuff. And so figuring out where that flow ends up being and setting the tone for the rest of the chassis is like huge for me and very important. And so this is Alex's project. I know that's kind of like a weird tangent, but there's Alex, there's Colin, there's Alvaro, and there's myself. And this is this is going to be like kind of his baby. I know for sure I'm going to have to do the dash and the center console and the upper console just because like I'll be able to get what we need out of that, and that's advanced. But really like the tube structure and the sheet metal back here, I am just working with him as the design orchestrator and director, and then he is doing the Lord's work. I got protein in my throat. And it's not that kind of protein. Watch it. So looking at this stuff, there's like a definite profile we wanted to go after. This will have a nice big custom fuel cell in the back, tailored to the vehicle, pocketed like so it fits in there like a glove. We'll send that out to Pyrotech to get a bladder. And that's also something like that's gonna add great weight in the back of this thing. You can see that just the spacing, like this is obviously where our stretch is, and how much space there is from B pillar to that third seat is optimal. Stuff that I don't want to do on like vehicles like this is I don't want to build like a really gnarly cage around that seat that's very tight and confined, because it might be safe, but when you're in there, if you're in like some tight confined cage that you have to crawl into, like you go in between the front seats and go back there, it's just like there's a spatial awareness that happens where you don't want to feel that confined space. The other thing is running this. Now, I am not a convertible person or a Targa person or a take the top off person, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't build this truck to work both ways. So with the Bronco, this is our first Bronco we've done besides Burke's older Bronco. This is like the first OJ style Bronco. And I wanted to get a silhouette here and a profile that works if the top's on or if the top's off. The sill, like the rain gutter here, it kind of represents level to the ground. And we wanted to have like a slight kick here, right? So we're not just like, because even if you rip these tubes where they're level out of here, your eyes will do stuff where you go, are you sure that's level, or is it going up a little bit? You know, so you want to make, you know, an obvious pull down to add tension into the back of the truck. The other thing is to not, I don't want to just build a cage that stops and it's just like, what are you doing? Like, finish the thing off. And I also didn't want to do it where you build the whole thing out to, you know, the hard top, because really the cage is to protect the occupants and to protect any of the systems that are integrated into the chassis. So like that, if you roll, you're replacing the hard top no matter what. That's just how that goes. So having this set up where it's working and it's protecting what it needs to, and it's also representing like a shape and a surface that works, you know, when you take this thing off, that's key. So this is really, these are like, you can call these our profile tubes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through and kind of give you a rough on what we're looking at as far as ideation on the next few layout tubes here. Things to consider when you're laying out chassis tubes, and this is just my opinion and how it's worked for us. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong or good or bad. It's just my own insight. But I always try to look at where these things, you know, off-road vehicles especially, they are built for impact. They take impact over and over and over. I mean, you could probably call it abuse. These vehicles get abused, and they're doing everything. That's why everything is so big. That's why the shocks are so big. That's why just everything is overbuilt, because you're really just hammering these things into the ground over and over. And with that being said, like I look at the contact points of where impact's going to be and then try to disperse that into the load range of the chassis. So same thing, like where, I don't know if you can see, but like, you know, I have it marked on the, you know, the frame here, kind of above the axle. I know that we're going to run bumps, and we're going to mount the bump stops again on the chassis, and I know that they're not going to go over the back. I know that they'll be at an angle, because that's kind of how we like to do things. We'll probably end up having them at the same angle as the bypass or a little more, and they'll be more towards the front of the axle. So I've indicated for Alex where a tube's going to go, and what we'll do there is like, that's a great zone of like impact, where that's a consistent thing you can bank on. And it's the same thing. So when you tie it in, we've looked at this before we even started, gone, okay, well, like what's our, I strive to try to find optimal design, and a lot of times in unorthodox ways, and I don't think it's even trying to do it, it's just how things come out, and that's why we build what we build. But like favoring the seat, like the center point of the seat here, is huge, and this is like one of the main hits we're gonna do here. And I'm gonna just kind of start going on this thing. So this should give you a pretty good idea of stuff here. Same as Eric's Vivian, the F100. We'll use like the mains that you see right now are 2-inch 120 wall chromoly, and then what we'll do is we will integrate a lot of the stringers. We'll kind of use our best judgment and integrate like 095 and 065 style tube, where it's this thin wall. It still all looks like 2-inch chromoly, but it's on a diet. And with Eric's truck, it made like a huge difference. It was 5,800 pounds wet. Same exact wheelbase and tracks width, I think a little wider in the front than a spec truck. And it just, all the lightweight stuff we thought about, like all the floors being aluminum and all the thin wall tubing where it made sense, like it shaved pounds, and it really works. If you just exercise that from the start, you will end up shaving weight on stuff. But this is our layout right now. Well, that's what we get here. It looks like a lot, but it all makes sense. And if you kind of think of the tie-in points, what we're working with here, fuel capacity, seating, you can kind of see like this, you know, like all these, we put the seat in there and mocked that up before we even started on where our miter up there is going to dive down into the bottom miter junction. It's all based off of like the packaging. And so what that lends to is supreme safety, obviously dynamic shock support there, going up, everything. If you just kind of look at where everything ties, it all hits in the right spot. And then boom, right into your bump zone, there's a little triage of tubes that go from different support sections into the bump zone. So the whole thing, the rigidity, it turns into something amazing. Now, something to think about too with this is this vehicle has a pretty badass dual spare tire carrier that swings on the tailgate portion. We're going to leave that. I think it's a good look for it. I think too, since the overhangs are so short in the back, it adds another like element of dimension behind the tail light and the tailgate section. So then it's not just 10 inches or something. It adds another, you know, set of tires back there mounted vertically. So that's always been the plan. That's why the back here, this is just going to be dedicated fuel cell. And I'm talking this whole thing, right? So all of this will all be fuel cell. And then it'll be right on this plane. So this tube will be like your vertical plane. And that's why this will work as well, because everything's tensioning and tapering in. So this thing will slide out. So we're not locking this thing in a way where we can't get it out, we can't lift it. And then we can still execute this rear X portion with the fuel cell still living in there. And I mean, obviously, like if you just start looking at like the surfacing here, it adds for like a beautiful shape where we'll just be able to tailor the whole entire thing to the car. As far as like finish work on this thing, we will, like it had double sheet metal in it before, meaning like there was sheet metal welded on the top side of the tubes to the cab, and then there was like on the bottom side of the sheet metal it was welded too, and it just, there's not a need for that stuff. It doesn't, like, it's not going to help you with anything. The best way to do that is if you wanted sheet metal the inside, and then just have a removable aluminum panel on the outside, or just sheet metal the outside and then have exposed tube in here, and then once it gets upholstered, you don't even see that stuff anyways. So that's just stuff to think about. I don't like the look of like, if you left, you know, you built your chassis out and say the greenest tubes, and you do sheet metal on the inside portions here, then what you get is I'm sinning right now. You know, if you have your chassis tubes like this, and this is the inside here, and you add your sheet metal here, it looks very clean and sanitary from the inside view, but from the outside, where there's rock, mud, debris, bullshit, you literally have little pockets in here, areas where dirt can get, where you're just never going to be able to clean them. And unless you add an aluminum panel on here, like it just screws the pooch as far as tidiness and cleanliness. Especially if you're doing like upholstery on this, then you could build it where you do sheet metal on the outside. This is the outside, and you have your panels like that, and then you literally can put foam and carpet, you know, and whatever, and sound deadener over that whole thing, and you don't see it. So there's stuff to think about that. Like think about like that when you're building a car, like the exotic for Thomas. All the back tin work I did like that, right? So it's streamlined. You don't see any of that exposed tube with, you know, panel on the adjacent side of it. And there's just ways to go about that through the stuff to, I think, save time and just clean up and like make the thing clean, like in the best way. So right now with this, I don't think we need to like dive too hard into everything. The one other thing we did get done for the front that's going on is it had a kind of experimental steering setup on it, a swing steer setup. It is a TTB, a twin traction beam up front. It will be a 4-wheel drive with option to go into 2-wheel drive, but like the steering it was still going to use a gearbox and a ram assist, but it just wasn't optimal and it wasn't going to work, period. There's no other way to say that. It was experimental, but it wasn't all the way complete, so it wasn't a huge loss. I had Jason with JEH Consulting come over here, and Jason works with us closely. He is a mastermind. He has an amazing brain. You can check out his podcast if you want, and his name is Jason Hurd, and he came over, scanned the front, and we are going to do a bolt-in rack conversion for swing steer for Broncos and 96 F-150s or anything with this kind of frame rail in the front. So we're gonna delete the steering gear, delete the ram assist, and you're just gonna put in a trophy truck rack, and that thing's gonna drop in. It's gonna be on billet sliders, and it's gonna slide your tie rods for your unequal link twin traction beams. So that's something to look for as a product, but it's also something really badass because I think it's been done where they've done swing steer, like crossover steering with a rack, but I've never seen it, and I think it'll just be optimal for like serviceability and just less components and less, you know, systems and parts. So that's going on digitally right now. Next check-in, all these tubes are going to be in, so we can come back. It's something to be excited about. This truck is going to be completely finished to completion here. That means plumbing, wiring, paint, upholstery, testing with Keith, full desert testing, and then this truck's gonna go live in Cabo. It's gonna race NORA next year. We might even be covering this, racing NORA. So it's something to look forward to. If you guys want me to go into anything else in here, you know, you have some questions or anything, please feel free to comment. Thank you so much for the support. Like, comment, share the page. Whoa. Share the page with your friends. I just want to, you know, it's interesting how YouTube works, but I think if you just word of mouth, just share it so you can keep supporting us, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. So thank you. Have a good day.